Okay. So thank you very much for making some time to attend the tutorial. This is going to be about Snakemake because it's, or at least we think it's a useful tool to build workflows. So I'll briefly split the session today in two main blocks. The first one, a bit of discussion of the why workflows and why Snakemake. And then I'll guide you through baby steps to build the very first one with Snakemake. By the way, this is very informal, so feel free to open your mic, camera, and interrupt me. There is no problem in asking questions as we go through. I think the main goal is for you to kind of clarify as many questions as you have. So why workflows? I'm taking this picture from the high-C use case in CScale just to start the discussion. So here you see the workflow consists of 4 main steps. Download the data, do some pre-processing, run a model, and then do some post-processing. The idea is that you chain all those steps together, and the goals are here on the left. You want to go from raw data to figures or tables or something that can be nicely shown into a paper with just one click. So everything is completely automated. Then you also want to be able to rerun the workflow, applying new input parameters or new configuration, like for example, you may want to change the spatial or the temporal scales, because this workflow in particular is for that kind of workload, but can be anything, right? It's not restricted only the spatial temporal scale, but also anything that you can think of. And you want to be able to tweak that, one click again, run everything. The other goal would be so what if you have this long running workflow and then one step in the middle fails? You then want to recover or fix the issue and then rerun it again from scratch and just process what's left, but not redo absolutely everything. That's another goal. And the other goal is that you, for example, you may want to design reusable building blocks, reusable steps in your workflow that can be shared by many other steps. So you want to track dependencies between tasks, for example, and reuse them as much as possible, but also you want to be explicit about the dependencies with external tools, software packages, versions, so your workflow can be reproduced and can be reused as much as possible. Well, then why not putting everything into a single bash or Python script? Yes, of course, you can do it. You can do it. There is no problem with that. It's just that tools like Snakemake and others make that a bit easier. So make your life easier. But to be honest, there is always a learning curve. So you just need to do a cost-benefit analysis before moving into that direction. So having said that, does it mean that we always have to be workflows for everything? I don't think so. I like to be specific about when is appropriate, because sometimes you may have a very easy set of steps that you can just put in a script, and that's fine. No need to do any workflow, because creating the workflow and maintaining the workflow also comes with some overhead. So again, just consider when it's applicable. So as I mentioned before, so for example, if you are developing a workflow that you want to run many times with many combinations of input parameters, then having a proper workflow may be a benefit. Then, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a long-running workflow and some of the intermediate steps are prone to failure for some reason, maybe, yeah, you want some automation in order to rerun only what's necessary and don't have to tweak everything yourself manually. That's another advantage. And also, you can, with workflows like Snakemake, you can also put together heterogeneous tooling. Like, for example, you may be writing your main piece in Python, but then you may need to rely on R for something, may need to jump to Julia for something else, or maybe simply Bash for something else. So with a workflow, you can chain everything together, no matter the tooling, as long as you are clear on the exact dependencies. So having said that, so why Snakemake? So I think I've been playing around with one or two workflow management systems before, and I think Snakemake is mature. It's been around for a while now. It's got a big community around it, helping users to get on board and adding new features to the system. I believe it's compared to others, I think it doesn't have a very steep learning curve. So in my opinion, and yeah, this is subjective, I think it's easy to learn. So let's see what you think about the after the tutorial today. Then the other advantage of Snakemake is that you can easily start writing the workflow on your own laptop or your own PC, and then you can easily move it to a different system, another PC or another server, or maybe to the cloud, to a virtual machine, or maybe even to, we'll see there is integration with batch schedulers, like for example Slurm. So the idea is that the same workflow can be moved to different systems easily, and I think that's a pretty good advantage compared to others where, for example, there might be a requirement to have a Kubernetes cluster, for example, which is not something trivial, right? So I believe this is a good selling point for Snakemake. Also, Snakemake integrates pretty well with Conda and Singularity. So that's a very nice advantage, because you can then play around with the tooling that's already there to handle software dependencies very nicely. The documentation is great, so I add the link to the docs in there. I'll share the slides as well afterwards, so no worries. And now I think I'm going to be jumping, if you don't mind, between the slides and my terminal. So we can build this together. And again, please stop me at any point if you have questions. So the idea behind Snakemake is it's basically to follow what GNU-Make made, which is basically defining rules to go from inputs to outputs. Basically, the idea is that you have a kind of a call to a program here that's going to transform, or is going to somehow extract some data from the input file and put it into an output file. So that this is the most basic snake file. That is what is called in the Snakemake jargon. This is where you write your workflow, and the workflow is gonna consist of a set of rules. So this is the simplest workflow ever. It only has one rule. The name is count countries. We have a list of a text file on the right. You can see a text file with European countries. This is the input for the rule. The output is going to be the number of countries. And then how can we compute? So we simply use this WC command in the Linux terminal to count the number of lines in the input text file, and we dumped the result into the output file. So with Snakemake, you just need to put this into a Snake file, run Snakemake course 1, and then it runs this for you. Running this is what Snakemake calls a job. So let's directly have a look at here. Hopefully you can see my screen properly. So I have the snake file here. As you can see, this is the same as in the slides. And then I can simply call it like this. So a few things here. I'm calling Snakemake with one core, and then I'm using specifically this option because I'll be playing around with different snake files for this tutorial. So just to make it simpler, I named them differently, but this is also a nice option with Snakemake. So by default, if you say nothing, if you omit this option, it's going to look for a snake file in the current working directory or under a workflow directory in your path. So, but I'll be using explicitly a snake file. So that's why I specify here this. And you see, first thing is that Snakemake tries to build a direct acyclic graph. We'll see that a little bit later. With one core, and here you are the jobs. Basically, as I mentioned, there is only one rule, so that's what's being executed. And we see here also the European countries file. So because it's going to actually attempt to build this output number of files, it runs the share command in here, and it gives you some statistics about when it started, and job ID and file names, etc., and when it's finished. So now you can see that it's produced this output file, which is basically the output of calling this command line tool. So very first workflow, I think it's pretty simple. Any questions so far before we move on?
Yeah, so just quickly, under shell, you could basically put any command line command. So it could be Docker run, it could be Python, blah, 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 it could be whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. That's correct. Yeah, and actually I had a couple of slides about it later on, so yes. But that's the idea, yes. Okay,
can you use the input and output as a reference in shell? Because now you have to.
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes. So that's exactly. Oh, sorry, I went to.
Oh, okay, I see it. Yeah, I saw it already. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll go to that. Yes. So thank you. We'll cover that in a second. Very good. So first thing I wanted to mention is that the nice thing is that if we go back to the workflow and we say, okay, I'm going to run it again. It says I'm building the graph, but I find that it's nothing to be done because you asked me to create this file with this command. The file is already there, so I have nothing to do, right? So very nice. What if I say now, yeah, but my input, which is European countries, I'm going to add here Belgium because I want to add a new country. So now I run a Snakemake and it says, hey, okay, so you are running the same command, but now the input file is different. So then I assume that the output file is going to be different. So I'm going to recompute everything from scratch and it runs everything. And then if I go to here, I see now, yes, it's to run the command. Before we had 7 countries, now we have 8. And again, if I run it, it says, oh, everything is the same. I don't run it again. So that's very nice, I think. Automatic tracking of what's been done, what's left to be done, etc. So then, yeah, this is what I'm explaining here. The goal is that it only rerun jobs when the input files have changed. So that's a very nice addition. You don't have to care about that. So this is where you start to see advantages over your own script where you write everything. Can you do this your own? Yes, you can, but you start adding things that are kind of superfluous for the workflow. You need to check, is it there? Has it changed? Well, Snakemake does it for you automatically. So yeah, this is what Guido mentioned before. Instead of using directly in the shell command the explicit input and output file name, you can simply replace it with input and output, and it's going to be exactly the same. So yeah, this is just to generalize your rule a little bit more.
And those, those
yeah.
keywords, input, output, are they specific, or can you do whatever in there? I mean, can I write, can I use other words instead of input and output and reference those in the shell?
I believe if you want to refer to this, you have to use this keyword, not anything else. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Then what happens is if you need to add more, so maybe your command considers not a single input file or output file, but multiple. So you just need to add them here, but be careful with this comma here, because if you forget it, the error message is not nice. So that's why it's in red. I believe I have that example over here as well. Maybe it's snake file 2. So again, I'm rerunning this with a new workflow, and because now I'm adding a new input file to the rule, it says yes, we need to rerun this again. So now we have number of countries is 2 European and 2 other countries, right? And yeah, this is just an example of showing you how to add multiple inputs, changing the rule. It runs everything from scratch. Then what else? Yeah, so as your workflow starts to grow, it is good practice to put everything organized in folders. So Snakemake doesn't really actually matter if you put things under subdirectories, and that's going to help you to actually organize better your workflow and your working directory. It's going to be helpful for everybody. Still, you see, we add here subfolders, but we keep the input and output in the shell command. So I believe that's also here. Snake file 3, possibly. Yes. And the only thing is that you need to basically make sure that the input files are correctly located and so on. So in countries, I have the country. Yes, I have the files. So if I now run a snake file 3, it runs it because it thinks they are different, I believe. Or no, I think, let me check. We have European here, and we have countries, European here. Yeah, so the local copy has Belgium, whereas the one in the folder doesn't have it. So that means changing the input again, and then the output should be in stats number of countries. So yes, it's going down to 9 instead of 10. But basically, yeah, it reruns because they were different files in the input. So now, yeah, it shouldn't run. Good. But as you grow, yeah, please use folders to organize everything. Then, okay, so we've been working with just one rule, but let's make this a little bit more interesting, because in the end, we want to build a workflow. So I'm adding here 2 rules. The one in the bottom, it's exactly the same as before. As you remember, we had 2 input files with countries. We wanted to compute the number of countries with this command. Now I'm adding a new rule. The name can be whatever you find useful for you. But this rule takes as input the same file as the output of the other rule. So that's what connects one to the other. The other thing is that, for example, here, I'm doing in the shell command, I'm doing a simple touch. For those of you that may not know this command, this is basically creating a file that if it doesn't exist, or if it exists, it just modifies the modification time, I think, or the access time. I don't remember which one. But basically it's just changing the last access time in the file. Why do I do this? For several reasons. First, as Bjorn asked before, here you can put arbitrary commands, which is, I think, flexible and good. The other thing is that, see, I do this touch with a preprocessing.done. In this case, the output is generated here directly. But imagine, for example, a command where you generate a lot of output files. Maybe it's complex to add in the outputs that amount of output files. So sometimes it's useful to say, I'm going to create kind of a sentinel file, which is name of the rule.done. And that sentinel file is going to be created here once the command, the real command is finished. So with that, you can also track progress when the task is done. And therefore, it simplifies a little bit the Snakemake workflow. Is that clear? I hope it is. So that's the idea why I'm using this here. I believe, again, this is snake file 4. Yes. So if I run it, you see here, it's only running the second rule because the first one was already built. And what that's doing is only creating this preprocessing done, which is an empty file. And then if I run it again, it doesn't do anything. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that now that we have 2 rules, you can also specify with the Snakemake which rule do you want to run. By default, Snakemake thinks that the rule on the top of the file is the default one. So if you say nothing, it's going to run, try to achieve this rule, and then look and create the graph of dependencies between rules and run everything. So this output is created. But you can also be specific. You may be, for example, interested in running a particular rule. And for this is what Snakemake calls a target. And a target can be, count countries in this example, or pre-processing. And then, you have the flexibility. For example, when you have a big workflow, you can say, hey, run it up to this point, or run it up to this point. And by default, the convention is that there is a rule in the top of the file, which is called all, and that runs the whole workflow for you. But it doesn't have to be the case. It is up to you actually to say. So I believe we can do it. So let me clean up, for example, this Sentinel file, and I can also remove the number of countries, which is the other input. I believe we can do a dry run. So this is telling you what's going to do, but I think it doesn't do it. Yes, exactly. It hasn't created the output. So this is a quick way to check what's going to happen before it happens. So, for example, with that, I can say run count countries. I believe that's so if you say that target, I'm going to just run one rule. If I say pre-processing, I believe it's called, yes, pre-processing with underscore, pre-processing. Then I'm going to run 2 rules in the specific order that you mentioned in the workflow. And as I mentioned, the one on the top is the default, and therefore, if I specify nothing, I'm going to run again all of them, both of them.
So sorry, I missed the bit. In which order are the rules executed?
Okay,
Top to bottom, or?
Well, it is up to you to define the how they are connected, basically. So so in this case, even though they are in this order, here you specify that the output produced by count countries here is going to be consumed by pre-processing here. So you are then defining the order.
Just by defining the input and output files?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant.
That's how you connect it. And then what I mentioned here with the default at the bottom, I'm sorry, at the top, is that if you don't specify a target, Snakemake is going to consider that your target is the rule at the top. Is that clear? Right.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't specify a relationship between input and output, then it'll execute it sequentially.
No. If it always tries to build, it's going to always build the dependencies between the rules. Always.
Okay.
The thing about the target is that you decide up to which target you want to run the workflow. Could be you want only to run one step, or could be that you want to run both steps.
Oh, I see. So if you say you want to run, for example, count countries target, it'll check which dependencies there are to run that and run everything needed up until that point.
Correct.
Okay.
And maybe that's clear now if we move to, well, I mentioned this already. This is, if you add a new file, it's gonna rerun the whole thing, even if they are connected through multiple rules. But this is the other nice feature of a Snakemake. Maybe this clarifies also what we mentioned just now, is that you can actually ask Snakemake, hey, print out the graph for me. So I know, so you show me your connection, the connections that you understand. And so for example, if you run this, let me see, I should have it somewhere here. The snake file, or maybe, and then I have to say DAG. So if you say nothing, it's going to print this, which it's kind of ugly, but then you can append this, and for that I think I'm going to copy directly. So you can append this. And that's going to create a file, an SVG file that I'm showing you right now. So you have only two rules, and actually the goal is to get to pre-processing, but for that you need to first execute count countries. So this is the order. I'm going to run first count countries, and then I'm going to run pre-processing. And if we go back to the slides, those dashed rules are those that haven't been completed, I think, or have been completed. I need to remember, because at the moment the one that we created was so those are the ones that have been created. Let me, so at the moment what we had is these two, right? Now I run the workflow. It runs everything. I preprint the DAG, and you see now they are dashed. So that means that this is completed and this is completed, basically. So you can see again, and you can play around with the target here and with the graph, and you can see exactly at which point is your workflow, what's going to be run next, etc. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Then, yeah, this is what Björn mentioned before. So now here in the second pre-processing rule, the shell command has been modified. Because rather than a bash command, I want to run a Python script. So I have my script, I call Python, I can pass input parameters in the command, etc. Right? So you can run Python or whatever. You can also run Docker if you want to, even uDocker, which is the user space version of Docker. And you can also, there is even pre-built support for Singularity. Pre-built because you can specify container and you specify the container image here, and you can then specify script and you basically run that script inside the container. So I believe that's a very nice integration in Snakemake. And I add the links to the docs for further information in that slide.
Could you, sorry, Sebastian, could you use the Snakemake also to include build container rules, do you think?
A build container rules.
So for example, in some instances, I'd like to build a container and I'd like to check if that container is built or not and only build it if it isn't there.
Yes, I believe you can do that. Yes. I believe it's a bit of a manual rule because you for that to check, you need to have a command to check that the image is available.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have the command to run the Docker build. But yes, of course, you can add that to the workflow. Yes, okay. Absolutely. Then the other nice thing is that sometimes you need to configure your workflow with many parameters. And for that to be kind of sustainable, the pre-built configuration management in Snakemake is you specify in the snake file on the top, look, this is my configuration file, and you specify the path to the configuration file. This is how it looks like in practice. You can have, for example, for the working example that we are discussing now, you can have two entries, like for example, European and other, and this is going to be basically translated into a Python dictionary where this is going to be the key, this is going to be the value. And globally inside the snake file, the dictionary is going to be called config, and therefore you can access it as a standard Python dictionary. So the rule, the count countries rule, is going to be modified rather than before we have here the specific path to the input file. This time we can say, okay, I'm going to get the path from the config file. So therefore you can see the value, right? You can say I separate the paths, I put them on the configuration file, and then I believe that's going to help with if I want to rerun the workflow with different inputs. What I do is I touch the config file. I don't touch the snake file, and I think that's also an added value. I think I can also have the example here, maybe. Yes, this is the one, and I have the config YAML. Yes. So basically, unless I remove, yeah, let's do an example, but snake file 5. Nothing runs because remember the output of this rule is the number of countries, so it doesn't run it basically. But that's the way you pick. You separate config parameters out of the snake file, and then this is how you pick them up back again. And I think I'll show you later a more complex example, so you can see a different way of working with the config file.
And the expand command that you have in the input there, is that a bash or a Python or a Snakemake specific command?
This is a Snakemake specific command,
okay.
The expand, but this is a regular Python string where you replace this input with this input.
Okay.
Can it only be YAML or also JSON?
Both, actually.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Yeah.
Then, so I think more added values. I'm gonna now go through a few add-ons which are very nice, and these are per rule. So for every rule in the snake file, you can have this. So for example, what if you want to capture logs from the command that you run. So this is very nicely integrated. You just need to specify the log keyword and then a path to output the log of your command. So again, good recommendation is that inside your working directory, you create a logs folder. And for example, you can dump the log with the name of the rule. So you can have per rule log files inside the logs folder. That's very nice. I believe that's also here, just to show you. This particular example is maybe, yes, this is what I have here. This may not be very relevant because the command is very simple, but, and I think the log file created is empty, I believe. Yes, because there is no error or nothing interesting, but yeah, that's the way it can help you with more complex commands. Then another thing is very interesting, I believe. It's the benchmarking. You can have per rule. You can actually time it, so you can get a sense of how long it takes per rule to complete. And I think it also does the some stats about the memory consumption and I/O. But again, rather than saying that, I think I can run it. So that's going to be snake file 7, I believe. Yes, where I replace log with benchmark. So that's going to create the benchmark and benchmark count countries. And this is an example output. So it took only, yeah, less than 1 second. But then you see load, I/O. This is memory stats in here. So I think that's very nice as well to get a sense after your workflow has finished which task is taking more, which one is taking less. Maybe you can then focus on improvements for your workflow, etc. So I think it's very nice. The other thing that I find very useful is that you can modularize your rules into different files. So when the workflow starts to grow quite a lot, you can then put different rules into different files and into different folders. So for example, in the in the top, I have the count countries rule again. I'm adding that to a snake file, which is separate from the one on the bottom with the rule pre-processing. And what I have to do just is include the first one. So now I can run a Snakemake again with the pre-processing rule, and it's going to trigger this and this, both of them. So you can see when your workflow is pretty big, you put things into the separate files, and I believe it helps to grow a little bit more. Yeah, the other very nice thing, I believe, is it's integrated with Conda environments. So again, per rule, you can specify a Conda environment per rule. In this example, you just need to, the keyword is Conda, then a string to the environment file. You can see the environment file for this example on the right. I give it a name to the environment. Again, I'm using the name of the rule, which I think is helpful both for the name of the file and for the name of the environment. I think that helps you track down as the thing grows. Specify the channels and the dependencies, because WC command is part of the core utils package. I do that, and I believe this is another example here. Snakemake, snake file 9, I believe. Yes, because the 8 is with modules, but it's not really interesting, I believe, just for the sake of time as well. Yeah, I specify here Conda, and then I see the environment file. So I say snake file 9. Everything is up to date, but basically, if it's not, it's gonna download and install the dependencies and activate the environment before running the command. I think that's very nice because, for example, you can have, if you are writing Python code, mostly You can have a rule with Python 3.8 and another rule with Python 3.11, right? And happy days. The same thing if you are using R or Julia, I believe. I don't know exactly the support for Julia in Conda Forge, but for R is pretty good as well. So the same thing, right? You can specify, even it doesn't have to be Python code. It can be any other dependency that's available as a Conda package. For example, udocker that I mentioned before, that's a Conda package. You can use it. Or simple things like, yes, I want to ping my workflow to a specific version of core utils. So you can specify the version, point it, and I believe that's very useful for reproducibility purposes. So I find it very, very nice. Yeah, so I think before we wrap up, I'd like to have a brief look at other examples. So first, I'm gonna push all these snake files to this repository from the CSCale community. So this is the repository. You have all the examples in the examples folder. Here, I also specify in the README a little bit the steps that I follow for installing Snakemake, but it's up to you. There are different ways. You can see the documentation. Actually, I did add another workflow here, which is a little bit more realistic. Like, for example, I'm missing Benjamin here from CSCale as well, because he provided me with the example. But I'll briefly explain. This is downloading some data that we, in this case, small data that we uploaded to GitHub, but you can see how you can get data from remote sources as well. So you download the data. This is a zip file, so I have another rule to unzip the data. So well, let me go first for the first one. So this is a wget command, right? So I do wget of this path, and that's going to produce this output, the input.zip that I specify in this part of the command. Let me make it bigger. Then I'm logging the results on this log file, and I'm using this Conda environment. And let me check that. But basically, the Conda environment for that particular rule, it's this one. So I'm doing, I'm installing wget from Conda, basically, to do this. I haven't specified a version, but I could. So okay, I do the wget, I produce this input.zip. Then this rule is gonna take as input the input.zip. It's gonna then unzip it, and it does a few times because apparently Benjamin wanted to get this file out. So after unzipping, you get this output file. And again, I'm using a specific Conda environment and log file for those. Well, after the data has been downloaded and compressed, I'm running this Python script, which is taking as input this file from before, the diff file, and I'm producing a PNG output. So the Python file, I believe it's in the plot folder. So again, I can go to the plot folder, and I believe you guys understand better than me what it does, but basically it's opening the file, setting some coordinates, and that's what I can say. But basically it's plotting a figure. I think we can actually, should I try? Maybe this is the part where I regret. But let me just give it a try, because I didn't check this one before the tutorial. Can I say Snakemake course 1? Because this is okay. Yeah, it's doing something. It's at the moment it's downloading the input file. It's compressed. Okay. And maybe I need to specify the rule, if I remember right, that I didn't. Let me go back, because I believe this is what I mentioned. If you say nothing, it thinks that the default target is a top rule. So it just went to the download data, but did nothing else. If I want to plot the data, I need to specify here plot data with the same name, plot data. Yeah, so that's now, it knows that the data has been downloaded. It's now unzipping. Okay, yeah, it was created already, but I say yes anyway. I replace everything, all. And then what's the problem here? No module. This is the dependency. Maybe, yes, maybe I didn't specify. We have the data, we have the conda environment, and we have X-array. Oh, why doesn't know it? Interesting.
Maybe you have to activate the environment.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. That's a nice thing, that you shouldn't. Yeah. I don't remember now why. Maybe I need to check the log file, which is plot data. It says nothing. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't like it. Yeah, I know why. Sorry. Because with conda, yeah, this is a very good example. With conda, you need to specify this. Otherwise, it doesn't create. It doesn't create the conda environment. So now that's installing the conda environment for us. And now it's working. And what I need to do now is to go to the home folder and look for the plot, which is, I'm doing that on a different screen. I mean, looking for the plot, Snakemake, and this is the output. I don't know what it is, but there you go. That's been just created right now. So the nice reminder, if you use conda here, you need to also, well, luckily it's in the slides, right? So you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, if you use conda environments, you need to be explicit about it and say use conda. For example, I use Bamba because it's faster. But that's why, yeah, it failed. If I run it again, it says nothing to be done because the conda environment is up to date. The plot PNG file is up to date, so I'm doing nothing. And this is what I wanted to show with this other snake file here. But also, going back to the slides, I wanted to have, this is the high-C workflow. I tried to add an example of, well, to start with the Snakemake workflow. Apart from other additions, I want to focus on the snake file. And here you see I'm using the config file, and I'm using this, for example, these rules, download ERA5 data. Another important thing is, for example, for this download rule, you don't need an input, so you can leave it empty. The output is clear. You need to download. You see, this is where I'm also using a Sentinel file because the download brings down many other things, but I wanted to focus on, yeah, have you run this script? Okay, so once you do it, just create this Sentinel file, and I'm sure it's done. If it fails, it's going to break anyway, so that's not a problem. So I dump everything to this log file. I have a specific conda environment for this rule. And more interestingly, here is another way of passing parameters to your Python script. So the Python script takes those input parameters, you refer them to params.whatever, which is taken from here. And this value long min is taken from the config file that I mentioned. Let me go and jump to the, this is the configuration file. And this is where I specify the input data. And these are the environment, the conda environment. For example, this is the one for the download. The link is the link is open. I mean, the pull request is in an open repository, so you can go there and check it out yourself. But basically, this is download ERA5, download CMEMS, following the same structure. Another download here. And this is the preprocessing rule, which basically takes as input the 3 Sentinel files from the download. So going back to here, you see that there are 1, 2, 3 downloads. I create 3 Sentinel files, 1 per download. Once those have been created, I can then move to the pre-processing step in the pipeline. So that's how I connect them. And that's it. I think this is how then you then run the pre-processing. Again, this is a Python script, and you have your conda environment for it, and that's it. And I believe it's.
So
any question?
Yeah, one quick question. So when you run, so now thank you for showing that example, specifically relevant for me. I wanted to check. So those Sentinel files that you created, so the download ERA5 done. Those will only get created if the downloading rule was executed, right? Properly, without errors.
Exactly.
Okay. So if my download script or my download rule fails and returns some error or doesn't run to completion, then that output file won't be created.
Look, for example, the ERA5, I did add this touch
at the end
of the script.
I see.
That's one example. That's one way to do it. There is also a pre-built touch command in Snakemake. So here in the output, you can say directly touch, and you don't have to modify your download script.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna only write it if the shell command ends properly.
Okay. But for example, if I wanted to know that all the files were downloaded, if all the files that I expect to be there are there, and if there were any missing, I'd have to add that logic, right?
Well, if the thing is that you could, in theory, add as many files as you wanted to the output, and then Snakemake is going to track them. It's going to check if they have been created or not. If they haven't, it's going to stop with an error.
Okay.
But when they are so many, I believe it's confusing for the Snake file. So instead, I believe to make it more readable, maybe that logic should be into your script. Yes, that's my understanding. But it's up to you, basically.
Yeah. To decide. Okay, cool.
Okay, then I go back to the slides. So those are the 2 examples. And then it's only 3 minutes to 12, but basically there are many other advanced features for Snakemake that I haven't mentioned. So there is like a pre-built functionality for scatter gather. That's when you have to run the same thing for the same command for many input and output files. And there is a pre-built functionality in there where you just simply change the index from file 1 to file 2, for example. Again, the links are in the docs, very easy to follow. If you have access to a cluster, a batch scheduler, there is an integration in Snakemake. You can run, apparently, this is something that I also want to check. I haven't done it, that's why I haven't included it. But now I want to take this dummy workflow, take it to a Slurm cluster, and apparently, if you just use this, it's going to be submitted to the cluster for you, which is very nice. So I want to try this as soon as possible. You can also create HTML reports. There is a report directive that you can include in your Snake file, and it's going to plot I think benchmarking information, the graph, and other relevant information for your workflow. There is also pre-built functionality to access remote storage, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and traditional FTP, SFTP, HTTP, many things, many options. I haven't tried those honestly, but there is the link there to the exact documentation page. Also, as you get more into this system, there are some best practices that you need to follow, especially if you want to share the workflow with others. So it is more readable, more understandable. There even, I think, Workflow Hub, which is a hub for uploading your workflow in a way that's kind of more fair, the workflow itself and the way it runs. So have a look at it. And FAQs as well. And I think that's it. Yeah, 12. Great. On time. Any questions?
No, not for the moment, Sebastian. Thank you very much for this demo. That was incredibly useful and very clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good. I think I'm gonna share the slides with you. I think I'll be also sharing the recording and any other questions that you may have also. You basically can contact us through the C-Scale community organization in GitHub, or email is also fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
So,
very useful.
great. So I'll stop the recording now. And I stop sharing. Well, so thank you very much for attending. And again, come back to us. There is another, an OpenEO platform tutorial that's planned for December. So if you want to attend, there is time to submit your availability in a doodle. And then maybe that's going to be the last one for this year, the OpenEO platform. But for next year, maybe I'd like to also give more tutorials, maybe, for example, creating virtual machines with a pass orchestrator or similar tools, so it's easier for you to deploy VMs and configure them and use the cloud more easily. But if you have any ideas, also something specific that you'd like to cover, send it to us, and we'll see if we find someone that's able to actually present it for you. Okay.
Thanks, Sebastian. That's excellent. Could you reshare the doodle for the OpenEO platform tutorial?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I can do that now. Even I think. So that's in the discussions. So this is. I'm gonna put it into the chat. So in the discussion forums, you have the link to the doodle.
Oh, amazing. Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice day.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Sebastian.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.